sure you stand in front of it. No, out there.
Yeah, I just have a few pictures of trains that I could actually see from my bedroom window when I was a kid, which is why I love railroading. This tower up here was Cayuga Junction at that point in time. It used to be a different place. And the trains would actually stop right in back of my parents' house. I could look out to my window and see them, or just cross over and take pictures of them. I used to hang around the station quite a bit. That's what it looked like when I was a kid. And I used to walk the main line. They let you do that back then. Through Leggett's Gap, which was the original name of our railroad, up to Clark Summit. And that's a pretty hefty grade that always had pushers on the end. All right. What are we going to talk about? I'm going to talk about the Pennsylvania coal fields, because I'm sure a lot of you you're not from around here, so you're not familiar with it. I'm going to give a brief overview of how a typical mine operation worked. And then after that, I'm going to walk you through tons of pictures of the Lackawanna operations in the valley. Okay? So that's all fun? All right? Except for the wives. Oh, am I in the way? I'm sorry. All right. Is that better? No?
Do you want to sit on a chair?
Jerry was better, so I'll just put this over here. Is that better? Why don't you sit alongside me? Okay. That's what I'll do. Sit right here. I got this chair. Is that better?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry about that. And then we'll run through some pictures from the DL&W archives of the various coal branches in and around Scranton and Wilkes-Barre. All right. So if you're not familiar with Pennsylvania, it's full of coal. The western half around Pittsburgh has bituminous coal, which is a lower grade quality coal. It produces a lot of smoke and soot. And on the eastern half of Pennsylvania, you have the anthracite fields, which burns at a higher quality, because we all know what Phoebe Snow and her dress stayed white, right? Because the quality of coal from anthracite, the quality produced by smoke, and her dress didn't get dirty. This is a closer up view of the anthracite fields in northeastern Pennsylvania, where we are today. The first one is the northern field, and that's where we are today, Scranton, centered around Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, Carbondale. There's two middle fields, the eastern middle field and the western middle field. And then there's the southern coal field, which is where anthracite mining started. All right. So the Lackawanna only mined in the northern field. It's the only place it went. The other coal fields were handled by other railroads. So when we're looking at stuff, we're only talking about the northern coal field. You can notice it's a crescent-shaped valley. You can actually look at it on a map. I can always pick it out because you can see the crescent geographically from the air. I can even see it when I'm on a plane. Pick it out pretty quickly. So the Lackawanna, the Erie, the D&H, and the L&W only mined the northern coal field. And the good thing about these coal fields, these happen to be the closest to Philadelphia and New York, of course being the two largest markets at the time. So they tended to use anthracite more in the beginning because it was closer. All right, and the first official coal mine, commercially mined, when George Washington was president in 1792, and there were 13 stars on the flag, was right around here in a place called Summit Hill, and that was the first spot where anthracite coal was commercially mined. This is the northern coal field blown up. And this is from Trains Magazine, who did an article on this probably about 20 years ago. And you can see the spaghetti network of railroads that wanted to deliver coal to markets. So let me untangle this a little bit for you. So The northern half of the northern coal field is the Lackawanna Valley. Oops, is the Lackawanna Valley. That's centered around Scranton. The lower half of the northern coal field is the Wyoming Valley, from which the state gets its name. And it's centered around Wilkes-Barre and Pittston. Okay? So I'll be using that term Lackawanna Valley and Wyoming Valley, and it's just two different parts of this northern coal field. All right? The two railroads had endpoints in the northern coal field. That would be the D&H in Wilkes-Barre and the Central Railroad of New Jersey in Scranton.
Vice versa.
Did I say?
Yeah.
No, CNJ terminated in Scranton and the D&H in Wilkes-Barre.
Okay, I see your point. Sorry.
Yeah. The only two railroads that passed through the coal field and had other endpoints were the Lackawanna and the Lehigh Valley. All right. And then there was several railroads that built branches into the coal field. That would be the DL&W built a branch, a Scranton branch. The Erie built their Wyoming branch, and O&W, Erie. The Pennsy built their Wilkes-Barre branch, and there's one other railroad. I can't remember.
Susquehanna.
Yes. Well, the Wilkes-Barre and Eastern, right? Which is really part of the Susquehanna. Thank you. By the way, the first railroad in the northern coal field was the Delaware and Hudson in 1829. And that was a gravity railroad. It wasn't, your traditional modern day operation. And by the way, there are historical societies right across the street. And Carbondale was, where we are, is where mining started in the northern field. This is a diorama that the DL&W created. Watson Bunnell took a photo of it, of a typical DL&W coal operation. Now there's lots of ways to do mining, all right? The DL&W typically did what's called shaft mining, all right? And this kind of depicts a lot of the components of a typical colliery. I'll say mine from here on because it's easier, but the technical term is a colliery, which includes all the various buildings and stuff that make up the whole operation. So the core, the thing that starts a colliery is called the shaft, right? And you can think of that as like an elevator shaft, right? Because the coal is in seams, right? Think of them as floors from which you can excavate the coal, and the shaft provided the elevator to get to those seams of coal and mine the coal, right? And at the top of the seam is the elevator lift or the head frame or the hoist, whatever you want to call it. And then the hoist would take the coal and bring it, sometimes by a conveyor, up to the top of the breaker. That building is called a breaker, and it's called a breaker because it takes large chunks of coal and breaks it up into smaller pieces. And it goes to the top because it's going to work its way down, break it, clean out the slate. It's going to break it up into different sizes because different furnaces use different sizes coal, right? And then it's going to sort it and put it into hoppers, as you can see here, at the bottom of the breaker. Make sense? Okay. And now down below, of course, the guys doing the hard work, the work that my father, that my father said, I'll never do that when he walked into a coal mine. But these guys are doing the hard work, chipping out the chunks of coal and getting them onto mine cars so they can be lifted up to the breaker. All right, let's talk about the DL&W and anthracite, since there's so many railroads involved in it. The DL&W from the very beginning wasn't just a railroad, it was a coal company, a separately reported entity of a coal company. And you can go through all the annual reports and you can see the figures broken out for the coal that they produced. It was a coal company for almost 2/3 of its existence, for 70 years, from 1851 to 1921. And during that period, a substantial portion of its revenue came from coal. It opened its first mine in 1851, the diamond mine. And you've probably heard of the Diamond Branch. If you're a fan of the Steamtown area, there's still remnants of the Diamond Branch. The second mine it opened was in 1854 when it started to build up the Bloomsburg branch to get more coal. And then as the 1850s and the 1860s and the 1870s played out, they bought or built more and more mines, and of course they built more and more trackage to reach those mines. It began also not just mining, but it also began serving other mines that it didn't own. I'll call those third-party mines, and hauled coal to market for them. So hauling was a big part of their business. As time went on, there was more and more mines opened. In the beginning, they tended to be more in the Lackawanna Valley, and as time went on, they shifted more and more to the Wyoming Valley, the southern end of the northern coal field. The DL&W owned and operated 25 mines at its peak, most of them along the Kaiser Valley and the Bloomsburg branches. And the Kaiser Valley book would detail all of those for you. In 1915 and 1906, there were cases, well, 1906 was I forget the name of the act, but anyway, they wanted companies that hauled stuff not to produce the stuff they hauled. In 1915, the Supreme Court, the United States, brought up a lawsuit against the DL&W specifically that they still hadn't separated out their coal business from the railroad business. And so a decision was made against the DL&W. They had to get out of the coal business at some point, which they eventually did in 6 years. In 1916, Woodrow Wilson was president, and we have all 48 stars on the flag. The last DL&W mine built, was called in Loomis, opens near Nanticoke, which is just south of Wilkes-Barre, on the southern end of the field. In 1917, the anthracite coal production for the whole industry, not just the Lackawanna, but it peaked at 100 million tons. Just to give you an idea, in my parents' house, the most amount of coal we burned in a winter was 3 tons. Right? So we're talking about a lot of homes, a lot of businesses. In 1918, World War I ends, and the first oil-burning furnace is manufactured or invented. All right, and I put that there because that's about to change things. And then in 1919, the first natural gas furnace was invented, which when my parents put that in, I was very grateful. Because I didn't have to shovel coal and find kindling anymore to get the fire started. Okay, so we have a Supreme Court decision against the DL&W, and so they go ahead and they divest their business. They sell it off to a company in 1921 in September, and Glenn Alden takes over all of their mines on the Bloomsburg branch, the Kaiser Valley branch, and the other operations. Of course, the mines will continue to ship their coal by the DL&W. There was kind of a tight relationship between those two companies. But the DL&W sold the business for $1.2 billion in today's money. All right. And the DL&W held the mortgage and eventually sold it. And they made money on that. So what happened after the DL&W got rid of its coal, and this is important because you'll see some of this later on. In 1922, Glenn Alden acquires the non-DL&W. It starts getting other mines that the DL&W didn't own. And in 1931, it starts marketing what they call blue coal. They dyed it coal, and it was marketed on shows like RKO Theaters, The Shadow, if anyone heard of that or listened to it. And there was widespread advertising for blue coal being the top quality coal. So that name is important because as time goes on, you can see here, this was the last breaker in the northern coal field. It was called the Huber breaker. It was in Ashley, Pennsylvania. down the southern end of the coal field. And it produced 7,000 tons of coal a day. So we're in the millions in a year, right? This will be the last one standing until it was torn down in 2014. They tried to preserve it, but nobody had the money to keep it going, and it became dangerous. All right. In the 1940s, the Moffett Coal Company started purchasing all the old DL&W mines in the Lackawanna Valley, the northern end. And then in the 1950s, Glenn Alden was starting to get out of the coal business because they saw the end coming. And so they got into other businesses like RKO Pictures. They owned Bourdelle France that makes the fire trucks. They manufactured a lot of textiles, including BVD underwear, if you remember that. And they wanted to get out of the coal business. They knew where they were going to get out of it eventually. In 1959, near Pittston, Pennsylvania, miners got too close to the floor bed of the river, and the river came through the mine. 12 miners were killed. This was 3 weeks before I was born. And they tried to block the hole by dumping coal hoppers into the hole. Eventually, what they had to do was build a cofferdam around the hole, and then they filled it in. But that kind of ended a lot of mining in the northern coal field. It was crazy. It did that. The coal companies were getting more and more desperate, and the miners, they made the miners do more and more desperate things. Right. So in 1966, Glenn Alden finally gets rid of the coal business, it becomes the Blue Coal Company. The Moffett Company ceases its operations. At this point, for the most part, coal mining is just about at its end. And then finally in 1976, the Blue Coal Company goes bankrupt. These are all descendants of the DL&W, right? And the last breaker that I showed you earlier stops operating. Today there are no mining operations in the northern coal field, none. The mining operations that go on are done they're done in the central coal fields or the southern coal field, and they are done, coal is transported via the Reading and Northern, which uses the old Lackawanna moniker, the Road of Anthracite. So there's still plenty of mining activity, just not in this part of the coal fields.
There's no more strip mining done?
Not in the northern coal field, no. None that I'm aware of. There's a lot in the central and southern, but not up here. I think most of those were gone by the late 70s, at the very latest.
Did they pay out, or they just abandoned them?
They pretty much abandoned them.
So they're still coal.
Or they tried to sell them to smaller operators, right?
So the coal's still there?
Oh yeah, only the figures I saw is that in the northern coal field, only half of the coal was mined that's there.
It's just once the pumps shut off.
Right.
The last firms were like you said, late 70s, early 80s were the last deep ones trying. The pumps that were left on couldn't keep up with all the water that was down there.
Right. Mine's basically flooded. And you can see, when I was a kid in the 70s, there was abandoned collieries, culm dumps or culm piles. It's the waste product from coal. It's just basically rock, slate. And they were everywhere, and the area was really scarred, and no one had any responsibility to clean it up. So in the 70s, it was a pretty ugly mess to be living in the Lackawanna and Wyoming Valleys. Yes, sir.
Hey, Don, a question for you. As the coal business deteriorated and this whole area was affected, like what took its place, or did anything take its place?
This area is, it's recovered like a lot better than some areas like say Youngstown, Ohio, where the steel mills disappeared. But it still hasn't, it basically has lost a third of its population. So not much replaced it. Right. So yeah, the valley struggles with jobs, even to this day. All right. Now, what's the impact of all this? And then I'll move on to pictures, so we can go more quickly. I'm sorry. And I didn't really know this. I pulled all this from the annual reports of the DL&W. So I brought a book on what the DL&W did in the 1850s and 60s. Up here, the most important thing is you can see anthracite hauling and coal production, because it was a coal company in 1860. 64% of the DL&W's revenue came from producing coal. Think about that. 64%. 79% of all the stuff that it's hauled, and it hauled steel. Remember, Scranton was a steel town back then, hauled rails up to the Erie. Still, and it was the largest steel mill in Scranton until the 1870s, right? In the country, it was in Scranton. And so they hauled a lot of steel. But still, when you look at the overall revenue, 79% of their haulage revenue came from coal. So this was an extremely coal-dependent company. By 1915, we're getting a little bit more diversified. 29% of what it hauls is coal, anthracite coal specifically, and 1/3 of its revenue, total revenue, hauling and coal, is from coal. So it's still a very, coal and coal haulage is a huge chunk of its business. So now we go to 1943, we're in the middle of World War II. Roosevelt's president, and we still have 48 stars. 12% of what the DL&W was hauling was anthracite coal. More and more of the coal was coming from the other coal fields, right? And also bituminous coal was becoming more and more prevalent. And of course, we're no longer a coal company. This is the interesting part. In 1915, in today's dollars, the DL&W generated over $2 billion in revenue. Right? That's a pretty big company. But the real dollars at the time was 67 million. In 1943, it generates 81 million, but that's not the whole picture, right? Because the value of money declines over time, right? So it's really now a $1.5 billion company because it lost a good part of the coal business, right? So it was already, even though the railroad was busy and booming in World War II, it was already starting its decline. And then it gets even worse when you get to 1959, the last full year of operation. The revenue not only went down from 81 million to 71 million, but after World War II, everything got really expensive because there was a lot of people with jobs and factories were retooling to produce things and they couldn't produce things fast enough. And so supply and demand caused prices to go up. And so what it made $1.5 billion in World War II, it's now down to 800 million 16 years later. So we can see how the revenues, the loss of revenues from coal and coal haulage really impacted our revenue. All right, enough numbers and figures. Let's talk about operations. Excuse me. So the main branches were the Kaiser Valley, the Bloomsburg, the Winton, and the Diamond branches. All right. I'm going to talk first about the Kaiser Valley because that's the most interesting. The Bloomsburg next because that was a very large operation as well. The Winton and Diamond weren't really that big of an operation, but we'll touch on them. All right. So this is a DL&W mine map. What's important here is you can understand where we are. So this is downtown Scranton, where Steamtown is. Wilkes-Barre is that way. Carbondale, where we are, is up this way. All right? And I'm focusing on the Kaiser Valley. We'll see this map again and again. So I'm going to focus on the Kaiser Valley branch. And you can see in red all of the mining operations and branches that made up the Kaiser Valley branch. Here's a little zoom up of that branch. Here's downtown Scranton, there's Steamtown today. You can just see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 11 operations of mining coal. Of the 25 are in the Kaiser Valley. Not only that, what makes it really interesting is we have our freight car repair shops. And in 1948, when Kingsland closed in New Jersey, they also became the passenger car repair shops. And we also have one of 2 hump classification yards on the DL&W. The other one is in Secaucus. And the Hampton Yard was built to make the transportation of coal much more efficient. So the Kaiser Valley branch was only 5 miles long, but it also had spurs that were 2 miles long, 3 miles long. It wasn't just one branch, it was many branches. You wouldn't know today. You would not know today, because all that's left is the about 4 miles of the Kaiser Valley branch.
Reading and Northern serves it.
Right, and Reading and Northern still serves the Kaiser Valley. This Bunnell took this photo in 1908, and what he's doing here is he's looking from the southern end of the Kaiser Valley northward towards Scranton. And I didn't actually mark all the breakers you can see in this. So you can see these are all DL&W owned coal operations. Look at all the comb piles, right, from the waste. Look at all the breakers. You have the Archbald, the Sloan, the Hampton, the Hyde Park, the Brisbane. There's also in here, I didn't realize till later, the Continental, and then over here is the Central. So there's like 7 coal operations in this one picture. And they produced a whole lot of coal. And as a matter of fact, I just took 1917, which was the peak year. And in 1917, the DL&W in the Kaiser Valley alone, right, we're not talking about any of the other stuff, it produced 3.6, DL&W produced 3.6 million tons of coal in that 1 year, in the Kaiser Valley only. It produced more on the Bloomsburg branch. And it employed, in the coal field, it employed 6,600 employees. With the Kaiser Valley shops, they employed 1,000 people, and then you had, of course, people working in the Hampton Yard area. We're talking about close to 8,000 DL&W employees in the Kaiser Valley. And can you imagine how busy and noisy that was?
Question.
Yes?
Don, do you know, something I've wondered is where the Lackawanna had their mine, like their mine locomotive shops, their mine shops.
You mean like the Loki's?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer. So there's separate small mine locomotives typically manufactured in Wilkes-Barre at the Vulcan Iron Works. And they called them Loki's. They were little steam locomotives that hauled coal out of the mines. Where they maintain them, I couldn't tell you. I don't know the
Yeah, I
answer.
haven't found that either.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer. All right. But you can see how massive just the Kaiser Valley is. So I'm just going to quickly go through some of these operations just so you can understand the perspective. So this is actually near a couple blocks from my house. This was the Cayuga Colliery. It was opened in the 1860s. It employed 700 people at its peak. Interestingly enough, when Glenn Alden acquired it in 1921, they shut it down. They did nothing with it. So Glenn Alden, right off the bat, decided it didn't need some of these operations. When Moffett bought it in 1943, they mined another 1 million tons of coal until 1955. There was no breaker there. They took the coal somewhere else and took it to another breaker to process it. But it's interesting to see the progression of how these mines closed and opened and throughout the years. All right. So that's just one operation, and you'll see this. Other ones, what happened to them was much different.
Hey, real quick on that.
Sure.
Back on that last one. Any context to why those cops are standing there?
Sure, there's a strike. There's always a mine strike going on at some point, right? Oh, the working conditions or the pay? Sure, absolutely. The United Mine Workers was formed in 1890 by a local guy, what's his name? John Mitchell, right? And started in Scranton, and he's buried actually in Scranton. But the United Mine Workers went on strike often because the conditions could be appalling.
Yeah, I see a civic police.
Yeah, the city police were called in to keep the miners at bay.
The coal companies had their own police, coal and iron police, that there was legislative act that allowed them to have their own police forces.
Yeah, I think early on, but in this particular picture, it is the city police, because it says it right there.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. I'm sorry, I have a lot to go. So right down the road, right down the line, about a mile down from the Cayuga Colliery, was the Kaiser Valley Shops. And this is built repair shops were all over the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western. They were scattered all over the place. And the DL&W decided to consolidate them in the Kaiser Valley, the freight car repair. Yeah, there was minor repairs done elsewhere, but the big repairs were done at Kaiser Valley. And this is an overhead view. You can see these are the two main repair shops. This is the paint shop. You can see some hoppers just got painted. All right. You can also see the Kaiser Valley branch and the L&W right next to it. All right.
Don, you don't know what this track here is, do you?
Which track? No, I don't. And I had the same question, like, why do they have that odd track? In the
I don't know what it is either.
I have no idea. Maybe that's the hopeless track. I don't know. And here's inside one of the main repair shops. Of course, what's one of the big things they're repairing? Hoppers get banged around quite a bit. They get turned around by machinery, and so Kaiser Valley repaired a lot of coal hoppers, as you can see here. 1960, right? These buildings are still in use today as a steel factory and a plastics factory.
Mitsubishi on this, right?
Right, Mitsubishi owns one, very good. And I forget the name of the steel company that owns the other. Anyway, so let's go down from the Kaiser Valley shops, about another mile or so, and we're at the Hyde Park Hyde Park Colliery, and it produced 12 million tons of coal for the DL&W, and it employed 900 men at its peak. From 1922 to 1930, Glen Alden mined another 3.3 million tons of coal. And the DL&W kept the ability to haul the coal to market. It was idled from 1930 until 1948 when Moffett fired it up again, and it mined yet another 1 million tons of coal. It didn't finally shut down until 1961 in the Erie-Lackawanna years, so you can be pretty sure an Erie-Lackawanna train served this colliery, right? But what's also interesting about this picture is here is the start of the Hampton Yard. All right, now the Hampton Yard is that big classification yard. It was built really primarily to make sure that coal trains and other trains were built far more efficiently because there was so much coal traffic. It was overwhelming the infrastructure that was there. So in 1910, the railroad decided to build out the Hampton Yard, and I think it's like 30 tracks or so. There's an eastbound classification yard and a westbound classification yard. It has its own engine facilities, it has a roundhouse, it has a coal dock, it has ash pits to take care of the locomotives that work the mines. And right around the start of the yard was the coal storage area. These are called the Dodge Coal Storage Company trimmers that would take the coal in the summer, and there'd be huge piles here of coal ready for the winter when demand got real high. All right. And this is the Kaiser Valley, Maine, these two tracks. And over here are feeder tracks into the Hampton Yard. So cars were taken there to be sorted in classification yards.
This is looking north?
This is looking north, correct.
So what is in this area today? Because I'm trying to picture this geographically.
So the Kaiser Valley is taken over by manufacturing firms, and it also has other warehouses. The Hampton Yard is completely taken over by warehouses. It's nothing but warehouses. So what used to be shipped by train is now shipped by truck. All right. This is the coal dock that was in the Hampton Yard. And behind the coal dock to the north was the ash pits. And you can see where a moving crane could go down to the ash pits, scoop out the ashes, put them in cars for reuse for cinder blocks and other things. Yes, sir?
There's some consolation, Reading Northern has a big beer, wine, liquor distributor over there that gets service.
Oh, really? So beer, wine, and liquor, I didn't know that. Is that a recent thing?
It's been going on for a number of years, I think.
Okay.
Don't know the specifics of it.
Yeah, they bring box cars in every day.
The Reading Northern is actually very busy in this area today. It's just not coal, it's servicing warehouses and manufacturing. Okay.
Kane is the company that does the wine distribution.
All of this stuff, for the most part, is buried. You won't find remnants of it. You might find remnants of the roundhouse somewhere here and there, This is a view from a calm bank, Sloan, one of the collieries was called the Sloan, and Bob Runnels up on the hill taking this picture. What's interesting about this is you can see the roundhouse, right? I don't know if I can do this, but I'll try. Yeah, you can actually see the roundhouse area up close. And at this point in time, this is early on, you're running a lot of the DL&W is running a lot of camelbacks.
Don, do you know what this is?
What is it?
Where I'm pointing?
Sure, I know what that is. That's the Railroad YMCA, the Hampton YMCA.
That
So
building is still there.
and it's still there, and it's I think it's used for offices or something, right? But what's also interesting here is you can see a path from the roundhouse and the yards up to the YMCA. But yeah, there's another line there, right? Another train line. And that's the spur from the Kaiser Valley branch that goes to 3 of the mines, and it's like 3 miles long. So there's a lot of, and then there's trains going on the other side where this picture is taken from in the Sloan area. So there's tracks everywhere. This valley is loaded with trains and coal. All right, let's go to the next one. Yeah, there's still farmers back then.
There's so much going on.
This is the hump yard. This is obviously the hump. What's also interesting is you can see the coal storage yard in the distance, right? Those Dodge coal trimmers. Must be summer because the piles of coal are getting high, right? And you can see the Hampton breaker, which is being dismantled, and it's just turning into a washery. You can see the calm piles, and this is the yard office building. You can also see car riders on certain cars, and their job, and I can't imagine anyone volunteering for this, but their job is to slow the train down the cars down as they approach the train that they're destined for. And they had to do that manually, and they're sitting at the end of the car as a car slams into another set of cars.
I think it was taken in March. Is it 314?
No, that's B1400. That's the slight
It looks like
identification.
the guy has a heavy jacket